Robert Johnson, which he's kind of the original sort of mythic dead rock star.
I don't know who that is.
Robert Johnson? He was the old blues guitarist that supposedly sold his soul to the devil.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then he wrote Crossroads. And that's where like the whole idea of like selling your soul to the devil.
Meeting the devil at the crossroads. Yeah.
Let's set up the topic for today. Everybody, welcome to the No Fun Zone podcast. We're talking about cool musicians who died way too young and maybe in mysterious circumstances. So yeah, go ahead with Cobain, because I guess that's a good one to jump off of. Especially like Nirvana is sort of more in the lexicon nowadays, I guess, for some reason.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a weird one, huh?
Yeah, that's an intense one, right? I mean, like, to this day, it's still treated as a suicide, right? And there's been a rise in speculation. And then Sgt, I think, came out in 2015, and it interviewed the private investigator. I think his name's Tom Grant. That Courtney supposedly hired.
Mm-hmm.
And just puts like a completely different angle on his suicide, and whether validity of that documentary is, how valid it is also up in the air, obviously, too.
Yeah, there's controversy on both sides, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, if you had to pick someone who I guess was a candidate for death by suicide, Kurt Cobain would seem like kind of an obvious choice. He's dealt with depression for his whole life. Heroin addict, had massive stomach issues throughout his entire life, stomach pain issues. But Courtney Love is also kind of shady.
She seems like a pretty intense character.
Yeah, and just the circumstances.
Oh, sorry, she's not a character. She's a fucking human being.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Definitely the surroundings of his actual death seem somewhat suspicious. Mostly I was looking, and they bring this up in that documentary Soaked in Bleach a lot. The suicide note. It's very weird. At the very bottom of that suicide note, handwriting changes completely. The tone, you could read the first part of his suicide note, not necessarily as a suicide note, until like the very last couple of lines that are clearly written in a different handwriting. And, that could just be that could be Kurt's handwriting when he's jacked up on an overdose level amount of heroin. You know what I mean? But also it could be somebody else, adding a little something to the end of the note to make it seem like it was a suicide note. And then it was also like something about the door was locked from the inside, of the room that he actually, supposedly shot himself in.
It was locked from the outside?
It was locked from the inside.
Okay.
Which a lot of people have used as like, oh, well, then obviously he must have done it himself. But it wasn't a deadbolt lock. It was just one of the ones where you can sort of flip on the knob and then you can just close the door right behind you. And there's other shady stuff that goes along with it. I think Kurt had made a specific call to his lawyer to make sure that Courtney Love was not on his will, like 3 days before he died or something like that. Which, I don't know, seems suspicious, I guess.
I am looking at the handwriting, and it does look like two completely different handwritings.
Right?
Yeah.
And the tonal shift between like the majority of that note, and then all of a sudden it's very, I don't know, sort of apologetic. And I think it says like, you guys will be happier without me, which I don't know. It seems fishy. It just seems fishy. And then Courtney Love as a character herself throughout her whole life, in the documentary they talk about she was thinking that she was going to be the rock star and she was going to be the one earning all the money, and like she had all this sort of like egotism around her,
Mm-hmm.
and essentially like forced herself on Kurt Cobain and saying like, "Oh, you're my boyfriend now," and it was like controlling and sort of belittling. I don't. It's a weird one, but okay. So talking about just rock and roll death conspiracies, Tupac's a huge one, Biggie's a huge one, Kurt
Mm-hmm.
Cobain, Jim Morrison. I think part of it is a case of, yeah, that idea that, you know, these beloved artists that we grew up and loved their music, and the fact that they just went so quickly and so soon and so suddenly, I think maybe it's a part of our psyche where that's so hard for us to wrap our mind around. You know,
Yeah.
it's almost like the same kind of thing with the JFK assassination. Our brains can't wrap our head around the idea that it's just this one singular act that changes everything. And so our mind goes to like find another explanation for what happened. You know, it might be a little bit of a Rorschach test kind of ish, where we kind of read our own, I don't know, our things into these deaths, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know.
Yeah, it's also strange when it's like so sudden, right? And I guess back to Kurt's case where, there's just like a lot of mistakes and stuff made by like the police force and everything too. And like, I
Totally.
guess, the big thing is, sorry, I'm going to kind of revert what I'm saying, because like with all those, they're just such big stars. And so like, it's like it's like they're so famous, the only way to get out would be to fake their own death.
Yeah, there's definitely. I mean, that's the theory of Tupac is still alive. Jim Morrison falls into that category, and like, you know, I don't know how I would deal with the amount of fame, and especially like nowadays, kind of everybody can be famous. You know, everyone has a platform with social media, fucking podcasts, fucking whatever. Everyone
Yeah.
can be famous, whereas, a lot of the deaths that have like this conspiracy wrapped around them took place in a world where there was only like 100 famous people in the world. You know what I mean? When Kurt Cobain died, it was just, that was Nirvana. That was the band of like the 90s, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I guess nowadays fame is maybe less intense, or maybe it's more sort of put out there on purpose. Whereas, if you're Kurt Cobain and you're getting flaunted by like the paparazzi all day, every day, and you can't escape it in any way, shape, or form. And, you know, Kurt was a very sort of introspective, internalized kind of person. Like he didn't start a band to become this huge famous rock star. He
Yeah.
started a band because he wanted to start a fucking band with his friends from Seattle. And they just didn't, they wanted to make their own music. And then it became this huge thing that he probably wasn't prepared for.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you handle that. If you're a reclusive kind of person, and all of a sudden you're just always in the spotlight, and you know, you can't hide from uh, the fame and the fans. I don't know how you deal with that, because that's got to be fucking hard as shit.
Yeah.
You know?
And when you're working out big issues like moving through your depression, and like
Totally.
how much privacy you would get, how many people just want to use you for your time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
dude. I'm not famous at all, and it's still really tough. Like when you're in that depressive mode, having to talk to people because you're just like, fuck, I don't want to do this. But then when you extrapolate that to that's essentially 24 hours a day, that's got to be fucking real tough to deal with. So, I mean, that sets up the case of like, yeah, maybe a potential suicide or in semi-intentional, semi-unintentional overdose. But then that also sets up the idea of like, you know what, maybe I just fake my own death and I go to Cuba and Tupac is chilling there on the fucking beach cabana. And, you know, I could see both ways happening. But it also seems like such an elaborate thing to like fake your own death when you could just pull a Dave Chappelle after Chappelle's show and just like, fuck it, I'm going to Africa for a while. Fuck all you guys.
I wonder if, well, I guess the conspiracy therein lies from that is they had to fake their own death because so much of their lives were at risk from like the album records companies and stuff. Because I mean, they were wanted, you know, they were $1 billion like commodity, like, you know what I mean? Like obviously they aren't that, but these companies viewed them as this financial commodity.
Yeah.
And so it's like when you reach that level of fame, you're like, there are powers that like, you know, really try to manipulate you. And so the only way they could get out would be to fake their own death and fool, you know, these, you know. And there's also another weird conspiracy, which I don't necessarily believe, but it's well, I don't believe at all, but it's these companies might have hired a hit because then they knew that if that person died, then they could be the ones who were solely profiting from their product.
All their royalties.
Yeah.
I mean,
but the thing, go ahead.
When you look at Tupac, Biggie, the controversy with that, and Suge Knight's dealings with getting Biggie whacked, and also Tupac had like a record deal with Death Row Records that he had to complete, and he didn't want to be in that deal anymore, but he still had like committed to doing like 2 or 3 more albums.
Yeah.
And so maybe that was like, that definitely could have played a factor. And I think the idea of your sort of humanity being stripped away by these companies that just now see you as that commodity could definitely play a huge factor into all of that. Yeah.
The more and more you lose control of your own existence. So they're like, I got to fake my own death. I got to move to Cuba.
Yeah. I mean, that would be kind of that. I think people are maybe attracted to that idea, because it's a fun conspiracy and conspiracies are fucking fun, but it's also, that's such a romantic way of doing it. Like that's like, at the end of Christopher Nolan's, like the Dark Knight trilogy, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises, when Batman just fakes his own death and then he sees Alfred at the cafe at the very end of the movie, and they just give like a little sort of knowing nod to each other of just like, you know, I can't, that's actually a really good comparison of just like, I can't be the Batman anymore. Mm-hmm. And the only way for the Batman's legacy to continue is that he dies with his fucking shield on his chest, going out in a blaze of glory and disappears into the night.
Yep.
And I think that's a very romantic kind of way to go out if you could do that.
Totally.
But then if you're Elvis, you pick the least romantic way to fake your own death, you know? Just dying on the shitter.
Shit myself, yeah.
It's a romantic idea, but the execution on that one maybe wasn't so romantic.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless, I wonder if he had a big sense of humor. I don't know.
He had a big appetite, that's for sure.
He had a big appetite, that is for sure. Yeah.
I feel like Elvis could have been a funny.
There's also that weird kind of underground story of Paul McCartney dying after. Tell me.
I became obsessed with this in college. Not obsessed, but like it became a pretty heavy fixation where like I went through to the point where like I'd watch documentaries, and I've got this book of just pictures of the Beatles throughout their whole career, you know, and in the theories it's all like pointing out small differences in Paul's nose or Paul's ears, and I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up, but there's probably 40 little bookmarks in here where I pull pictures from before 1966 and then after 1966, and like compared them with like a magnifying glass.
And what did you come to conclude?
It's probably all bullshit. But it was fun to look into. Okay, so
Nice.
the story with that, I think this is like sort of the origination of like this weird conspiracy theory with rock and roll. Besides, like, I mean, there's a lot of conspiracies, which we could do a whole episode on, like deals with the devil and rock and roll. You know, Robert, what's his name? What's his name? Robert Johnson. Thank you. Jesus Christ. Robert Johnson, like the godfather of the blues, supposedly sold his soul to the devil. Jimmy Page was heavily influenced by the occult and actually bought Aleister Crowley's house. We could do a whole episode on just like rock and roll and the occult. But so the Paul is dead theory is like the classic example of like how a conspiracy can be born out of very trivial things. So the story is, I guess, that Paul McCartney was actually killed leaving a recording session at Abbey Road Studios on November 9th, 1966. And supposedly he got in a car wreck, was killed. His head was supposedly severed. And then they basically hired this, they had a Paul McCartney lookalike contest in Britain. The timing is all very weird. But in 1966, they happened to have done a Paul lookalike competition. And this
was
guy,
Paul McCartney at this competition?
No, it's totally separate. It wasn't officially affiliated with the Beatles.
Okay.
But this dude named William Shears supposedly won it, and he looked really a lot like Paul McCartney, and was coincidentally an actual like professional musician, or maybe not professional, but an adequate musician. So the story goes that Paul was dead, but the Beatles were making so much money and they didn't want to lose their allure, so they decided to hire this Billy Shears after they found him, or William Shears. They hired him and they forced him to get some plastic surgery done, and then basically parade as Fall McCartney, fake Paul. And then the theory goes like, this is why the Beatles stopped performing live in public. This is why they grew all their beards out for like Sgt Peppers and Abbey Road. The amount of like little things that people have found within the records, whether it's playing them backwards, and I think it's some song on Abbey Road where if you play it backwards, you can hear John Lennon say, "I buried Paul." Oh no, that's at the end of Penny Lane. Is you hear in the background John Lennon say, "I buried Paul." And then they interviewed him and they asked him about it. He said, "Oh no, I was saying cranberry sauce. I was just saying
I buried Paul
cranberry sauce." And then there's like a million different clues, I guess, that people have
you slowed down that recording for yourself?
Oh,
like, have
totally.
you heard it?
Yeah.
What do you think?
It does sound very much like I buried Paul. But there's also kind of the bias of if you're expecting to hear something, your brain is more likely to hear that thing.
Yeah,
so you go in to listen to it expecting to hear I buried Paul.
I'm gonna go into it expecting to hear cranberry sauce.
Yeah, do that and give me a rundown next week. We'll figure out whether or not. But it's like
at least I'm gonna try. But really, what I really want to hear is I buried Paul.
Right. So and that's the thing, is you want to hear it.
Exactly.
There's one song where if you play it backwards, supposedly it says, "Paul is dead, man. Miss him, miss him. Paul is dead, man. Miss him, miss him." And the Beatles were famous for using tracks in reverse already. Like you can hear that in a lot of the songs on Sgt Peppers. and I think it's in Penny Lane as well, where at the very end, like everything is sort of like flipped in reverse. What else? There's the album covers. So Abbey Road, it looks like a funeral procession, people say, where the way they're dressed and the, you know, Paul first of all is walking across without any shoes on.
He's the barefoot one. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, you never bury people with shoes on. George is supposed to be the minister, I think. No, John is the minister because he's wearing all white. George is the pallbearer. I can't remember all the details of all this stuff. But then also in Magical Mystery Tour, they're all in tuxedos and everyone has a red rose except for Paul, who has a black rose. Again, in Sgt Peppers, they have in the actual song Sgt Peppers, at the very end it goes, Billy Shears. And supposedly that's the guy who replaced Paul McCartney. The cover of Sgt Peppers.
You mean, are you talking about the beginning of Get High with My Friends? They're saying Billy Shears.
Yeah, so it's like in that crossover because it's essentially.
Oh, yeah, that crossover.
Yeah,
I've always wondered what they're saying, and in my head, I couldn't get past "We need cheese." Tells you what I was really thinking about.
Well, sometimes your sandwich needs a little bit of cheese, you know. Or they're at like the Olive Garden, and they've got a bunch of spaghetti, but they need some Parmesan.
Give me cheese.
And they just have to harmonize to the waiter and ask for some more cheese.
Dude, David Tucker used to think certain songs, he would mix up lyrics so bad. Like, you know, the Rolling Stones song Start Me Up. He would always think it said, it's Mario hanging out with Luigi. And I was just like, that's not quite it. And then he thought Cat Scratch Fever was Cat Scratch T-shirt. That's all I can remember. That's all I can remember at the moment.
I remember Mike, the 80s song Jukebox Hero. He thought it was the Juice Box Hero.
Juice Box Hero, I like that. Giving you High Sierra Capri Sun. Yeah, nice.
So I think really what this is in the 60s and 70s, there wasn't that much to do. Marijuana was becoming much more popular.
Mm-hmm.
And a bunch of stoned hippies were sitting in their basement ruining their needles for their record players, playing all these songs in reverse, trying to find these like satanic messages. But because you're, you know, affected by the sort of the psychedelic state of weed, you're going to hear more things and, you know, again, maybe read your own sort of opinion. And if you already are suspicious that Paul is dead, you're going to find the clues. It's like confirmation bias. You're going to find the clues.
When did it start to come out? Like, when did this conspiracy start to come out?
So I think it first came out on a DJ, like a radio DJ show. That's a little redundant, but a radio show where people would call in. And I want to say it was first floated in like 67 or 68, but it really gained popularity in 69. And I think my personal opinion is this was almost essentially just pure genius marketing by the Beatles. I think they were marketing wizards, you know.
I could see that.
They understood how to push the boundaries to get more attention, like very much like Kanye West does nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
You know, John Lennon coming out saying that the Beatles are bigger than Jesus.
Yep.
And then that sparked this whole like album burning in like this was like 64 probably. This was pretty early on. This is while they were still playing live. And it sparked all these protests, but then it basically pissed off all the square adults who didn't get it, man. And then all the young kids are like, they're going to rebel against their square parents and like, you don't get it, man. And then they end up buying more of the albums. And I think, I don't want to say it was necessarily crafted by the Beatles.
A little pop culture psyops.
Yeah. Well, it's
guerrilla marketing.
Exactly. And it's more prevalent today where like no news is bad news kind of idea, where the more
Yeah,
clicks
yeah,
and the more
yeah.
attention you get, the more your
Okay, yeah,
popularity
yeah.
increases. And I
Yep.
think they were functioning on that kind of level of just like, at least people are going to be talking about us, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And if even if it's negative, they're still talking about us, and that's going to increase our record sales.
So then, are there any conspiracies behind John Lennon's assassination?
If you ask South Park, yeah. No, that one's kind of, there are conspiracies around it. I personally think that, what's the dude's name? It's not Holden Caulfield. That's the guy from the book. But the guy who assassinated John Lennon, I think, really was just a crazy person who got obsessed with this idea from reading Catcher in the Rye of the phonies,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing John Lennon as, and especially historically looking back, excuse me, I had a little burp there. Looking back on John Lennon, like, yeah, he was a total fucking phony. You know what I mean? He was a wife beater, with his first marriage, like beat the shit out of his first wife while
Really?
singing all these songs about like love and peace and happiness.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
you know, love, all you
Jesus.
need is love. What did you fucking say? Um, also
I had
just,
no idea.
oh yeah, no, he was definitely, he was a shitty person and a really shitty father to Julian Lennon.
He was probably just he's a bit of a sociopath.
Yeah, but like,
And honestly, that deters away from any kind of psyop branding. It's like that motherfucker probably thought he was more than Jesus.
totally, and it's like, it's almost like a chicken and the egg kind of question of
Yeah.
like,
And from
was
a
he?
certain standpoint, maybe what he's saying is true because, and I don't know what exactly he said, something like, I am bigger than Jesus or I am Jesus.
He said the Beatles were bigger than Jesus.
Oh, that's kind of like, that's
Arguably true.
also just a pretty observant observation. Jesus. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Jesus didn't have girls. So the story of how modern
Jesus
PAs.
fucks, dude.
What's that?
I said, Jesus fucks, dude.
He probably did. Mary Magdalene can attest to that. Um, no, but the story of how modern PA systems in um, huge theaters and like arenas got started is
Mm-hmm.
the in the 60s, the decibel level of the amps that they had, because they were basically just playing with the amps on stage and had some other speakers around. The decibel levels weren't powerful enough to overcome the noise of all of the women and girls screaming for the Beatles. And so that developed the modern PA system of putting
Wow.
speakers up into like the rafters and pointing around and getting like this sort of surround sound.
That's
Um,
wild.
so yeah, with John, I feel like, I don't know, chicken and the egg. Was he this egomaniac, or was he set up to be this sort of sociopathic-esque kind of, I don't know, having cognitive dissonance of like being able to sing like all you need is love, but then also beating the shit out of your wife? Did that come? Was that already there, or did that come from, at that point, 6 years of being the most famous and most adored and most worshipped people in the world?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I mean, with the Beatles, I don't know if you watched the documentary Get Back on Disney Plus, but like that's a perfect example of like these guys had fucking egos, you know. Um,
Is it a good doc?
yeah, it's really interesting. It's basically like just kind of being a fly on the wall, sitting in on like recording sessions
Okay,
for
cool.
Let It Be. Very interesting, very cool. So Donald Trump right there. Very interesting, very
Pretty
cool.
good.
I watched this
Highly
documentary
suggested.
earlier this week. It's on this band I had never heard of. They're called the Beatles, but it's very clever. They spell Beatles not like the bug, okay? They spell it with like a drum beat. Very intense, very interesting. Um, But no, yeah, these guys had fucking egos, and maybe that's why they sort of. Okay, so going back to the Paul is dead theory, I don't think they started it, but I think as soon as it hit, they just leaned into it super
Yeah,
hard.
yeah. Oh, so
You know,
then it came out, that conspiracy or rumor came out while they were still like playing and touring and.
not touring. They had stopped
Okay.
touring, and that's the supposed reason why they stopped touring. Is Paul McCartney was,
Wait, did the Beatles never tour after '66?
no,
Oh,
no, they stopped
hey,
touring
yeah.
pretty early, and then just only did recording sessions.
Really?
Yeah, and it was never really explained why. Supposedly they
That
just got
adds fuel to the flame for me.
give me fuel, give me fire, give me double double sa. Ooh, um, yeah, and that's where like this sort of conspiracy comes from. Is like Paul's dead. We need to find a replacement, but if we just put this replacement out into the world to see immediately, everyone's going to recognize him as being this fake Paul McCartney. So we need to stop touring, and we're going to grow our beards out so nobody can see like the slight differences while Paul is still getting his final touches on his plastic surgery. And then we'll just kind of live in the shadows, and we'll put out these cryptid messages in a day in the life. He blew his mind out in a car. He didn't notice that the lights had changed. No, something's rather small. I don't know. There's all these like weird cryptic lyrics from the beat, and especially like that's the transitionary sort of period. You know, you've got the early Beatles with the Beatles when they're all in the suits and they've got like the mop tops, and they're kind of just like, "Ooh, I need your love, babe. Yes, you know it's true." And then '66, there's sort of the transition with like Rubber Soul and Revolver, where they start getting a little freaky and a little trippy and a little weird. But then there's all of a sudden Sgt. Peppers, which is like just the cover alone is so psychedelic. It's all a funeral procession, supposedly, is at least what it looks like. Um, if you look closely at the flowers, it looks
What
like
year
it's
did what year did Sgt. Peppers come out?
that came out, I believe, in '66 or maybe '67.
So it was the first album that came out after they stopped touring.
I think they had technically stopped touring a little bit beforehand. I don't think they
Yeah,
toured
yeah.
with
But that
Revolver.
was the first album coming out of their last tours.
Pretty much, yeah. Let's see, when did it
Those
come out?
details are very interesting.
So yeah, published May 26, 1967. So less than 6 months, or I guess 6 months, basically, roughly after supposedly Paul had died. But then when you look at the cover, and this is where a lot of people get their cryptid messages from, the cover of Sgt. Peppers, the cover of Abbey Road, which we sort of touched on, the cover for Magical Mystery Tour, and there's all these hints of like in Revolution 9, I think, on the White Album, they say the walrus was Paul, and then Paul is the one who's dressed as the walrus, and everyone else is dressed as something different. And with Sgt. Peppers, it's supposedly the cover is supposedly a funeral procession where everyone's sort of paying their dues. If you look very closely at the bottom, there's a left-handed bass guitar, which Paul was a lefty and played the bass, and that's in the flowers of the funeral procession. Aleister Crowley is uh, pretty prominently portrayed on the cover, and then somebody else, I can't remember who it was, but it was like a Russian dude has his hand basically just above Paul's head, which is like a sign of death in like sort of the Eastern Orthodox Russian culture, I guess. Take all of this with a big grain of salt. I'm reading stuff that other idiots are writing on the internet.
Hold on, I'm looking at as we speak. I see the dude right behind Paul like looks like he's waving goodbye. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, but he has his hand like over his head, which
Yeah,
supposedly
yeah.
is something to do with like mourning or a funeral.
Huh.
And you put your hand over the head of the dead body.
Oh,
Um,
Jesus.
yeah, Leicester Crowley is hanging out in there, which is fucking weird as shit.
Yeah, I'm looking for him. Oh,
Um,
there's Bob Dylan.
mhm. There's also the four wax figurines of like the early Beatles looking down mournfully at the grave. And then
Yeah.
you have the new generation of the Beatles standing right next to them with their fancy garb.
Yep.
Um, on the back side of the cover, they're all um, they're all facing the camera. Ringo, George, and John are all facing the camera, and Paul is turned backwards, so his back is facing the camera. There's
Oh
also
shit. Oh
right,
shit.
and then in another picture in the album, um, you can see a patch, which is supposedly Ontario Police Department or something like that, but it spells out OPD and it's on Paul McCartney's left arm. But OPD can also be officially pronounced dead.
Where's I don't see the OPD. It's on his arm.
It's on a different picture. It's when he's facing the camera.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Where's
I'm
the
looking at it
bass
right now.
guitar on the cover?
On the actual front cover, if you look, it says the Beatles at the bottom, and then there's
Hmm.
those yellow flowers, those yellow
The yellow
roses.
flowers. That's the outline of a left-handed bass,
Supposedly.
supposedly. Yeah.
Um, and I mean, this is all conjecture and just shit getting read into.
Well, it looks like the
Because
roses, or like so it's an outline of yellow flowers in the shape of a bass, and it looks like it's pointed for a left-hander. And then on top of the yellow flowers, there's these like green vines that look like bass strings. It looks like there's four of them,
yeah,
or at least I can make out three.
I mean, let's see. I can distinctly see three,
Yeah.
but I mean, it also looks like there could be a fourth one in there. Actually, no, I think I can see four.
Yeah.
But either way, that's enough to sort of, once the conspiracy's going, that's enough to just throw a couple of breadcrumbs in there to get you to sort of, and then also the bass drum that's in the very beginning. If you hold a mirror to it, supposedly it reads out the date of the death of Paul or something like that. So there's a lot of cryptid messaging kind of going on.
Hold on, I'm using my phone to read it backwards.
No, it's if you put a mirror horizontally along it. So you're not really reversing the image. You're
Oh.
basically taking the very top half of when it says lonely hearts.
Hmm.
You're essentially taking the top half of that and then also reversing that down just below. It's
Oh,
hard to
okay.
explain
I get
without
what you're saying. I
being
get what
able
you're
to show
saying.
you.
It's a mirror reflection of the top half. Okay.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I'll try and
yeah.
find all these pictures to put them in the YouTube video.
I could do that on I can do that right now on Instagram. It'll take me like a second.
Yeah, go for it. I'll keep talking my nonsense. Um,
Excuse me.
but yeah, I don't know. So as soon as you got me on that, I was just like, okay, cool. I can rant about just the Beatles for fucking 20 minutes. It's just interesting that the timeline is right when they stop touring. It's right when their sound drastically changes. And
Yeah.
honestly, the songwriting changes very much as well. The actual like physical songwriting, like the phrasings that they use, the chord progressions that they use changed pretty dramatically. So I don't know. It's just it would be
Whoa.
the greatest conspiracy. And then also I went through and watched interviews, more recent interviews with quote unquote Sir Paul McCartney or Sir Fall McCartney. And there's a lot of weird tells. I can't remember them specifically. I looked all this stuff up like a decade ago.
Yeah.
But anytime he gets asked about the Paul is dead theory, you can sort of notice his energy shifts a little bit. He starts feeling a little bit more uncomfortable and sort of like touches his face a little bit more. He starts having these like sort of Freudian responses. to being asked a direct question about the Paul is dead theory.
Do you know some of those? Wait, so what were the Freudian kind of slips or whatever that he was doing?
I honestly don't remember, but like a lot of touch in the face when he's being asked, a lot of sort of like covering of the mouth, a lot of sort of shifting and like, I don't know, going from like in interview mode and then all of a sudden shifting kind of back and closing off. You know, I just remember noticing that. I don't have any of them pulled up whatsoever in detail.
Yo.
Yeah.
It almost looks like it says 10 die 9 he die.
Yeah. And 10/9 November 9th.
Right? So it has 10 this is trippy as fuck.
I remember that. Yeah. He die 10/9.
So it's in a weird order. It looks like it says 10 die, but 10 is in numerical form, and then it says die, and then it has in Roman numerals it has 9.
Yeah.
And then it says he, and there's like a little diamond, and then it says it looks like it says die. He die.
Yeah. Which, if this is real, and supposedly like the whole story is
but honestly, if it is truly split in half, it should say he by, but BIE. So I don't know if that's a flaw in the, because if you mirror image halfway through an R, you make a B.
It's true.
So it does at the moment say he by.
Yeah. But
BIE.
But also stop ruining this, man.
You know, no, I'm just curious what BIE would mean.
He bought a ticket to death.
He bought a ticket to.
I got a ticket to ride.
Oh, it's the Bureau of Indian Education. Okay.
Now the conspiracy is getting deeper. Now the Indians are involved. Oh my God.
Ask the Indians where Paula is. Yeah.
Well, and guess what music started influencing the Beatles after George Harrison made a trip to India, and now all of a sudden.
It's true, but the Bureau of Indian, it's the Western Indian is what it is.
What, like
the
Native
BIE?
Americans?
Yeah, it's the Bureau of Native American Education.
Well, then that'd be the BNAE.
They call themselves the Bureau of Indian Education.
You know, I find that very offensive, and that's not a term that we should be using anymore because they're not Indians. Thanks, Christopher Columbus.
It was probably formed like in the 40s or something. Anyways, let's get back to
with that detail, you're missing the fun. You know what I mean? Sometimes that's the thing with conspiracy theories.
It does say 10 die 9. It does say that.
You just got to go with it. You know what I mean? It's more fun that way, as opposed to if you start poking holes in the theory. What
was the date of their last? Because he died supposedly. Paul might have died after going home after a studio recording session. Mm-hmm. And I assume that everyone says that happens on November 10th.
November 9th.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. But in England, I'm pretty sure they do day before month on their dates.
That's true.
So if anything, it says 10 die 9. So if anything, that means the 10th of October. Or sorry, of September. Sorry.
Well,
the
yeah,
10th
and either way, November isn't the 10th month, so that kind of pokes a hole in the theory. Would you stop poking holes in the theory, man?
Sorry, man.
Coming out here with your fucking logic. I don't know. It's just that was just a fun. It's fun to find the little kernels and the little nuggets.
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
what I mean, that's why I don't take conspiracy theories really that seriously. It's just fun to follow the breadcrumbs and to see where things might connect. And that might be an inherent flaw of my just pattern recognition tendencies, but fuck it, it's goddamn fun as shit. Let's see when the last Beatles concert was. because they did the rooftop one in like '69. Oh, the story thickens. Last concert was August 12th, 1966. So they have their last concert ever. Then Paul dies. They drastically change their whole look and appearance. They drastically change their musical sounds. They bring in this fucking guy, Billy Shears, who the story goes that they brought him in just to like sort of double and kind of play in the background, and they would just like kind of lean on John's songwriting. But then it turned out that this Billy Shears kid was actually a pretty fucking good songwriter too. He had to learn how to play the bass lefty, and ended up like contributing, a fair amount to like the rest of the Beatles catalog. But then they're also saying that they took previous written songs from before Paul died and sort of, rearranged those into the newer sound. That's also kind of when John started going off on his own songwriting, where Paul kind of seemed to constantly still just want to write love songs. And, John wanted to write Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
John wanted to get away from that lovey-dovey, early 60s Beatles, I want to hold your hand kind of shit. I want to shake your hand. Remember that guy on the plane? I want to shake your hand. I want to shake his hand. I want to hold your hand. That'd be such
good.
That'd be such a good Beatles cover. Hey, I want to hold your hand. Come on, I want to hold your hand. Yeah, I don't know. I that's just the Paul is dead theory always intrigued me.
Yeah. That's a good one.
It's been ubiquitous. It's been the longest running probably rock and roll conspiracy of all time. But there's a bunch of others. And not just rock and roll, but like music and just popular figures in general. Like, the theory that Avril Lavigne died in like the mid 2000s and the government replaced
I had no
her.
idea.
That's a popular theory that went around online for a while. Is that Avril Lavigne was killed and replaced by a body double.
Oh, Jesus. Which
important figures have had body doubles for a long time. Supposedly Saddam Hussein had a series of body doubles. Hitler supposedly had a series of body doubles. It's not unprecedented to think that this might happen, but it's also like,
right? It goes back to like, this person has died, but we still stand to gain a lot of money off them. And so what if we just told nobody?
Right.
And we can just pay off the family. We can pay, but that also is another whole, because the McCartney's family would have come out by now and be like, yeah, he's dead. Unless they're still like getting taken care of. You know what I mean?
Like some mafia shit.
Well, no, I mean like
the mafia.
Like this is an unfortunate tragedy that happened to your son. We're gonna keep this going, but we will give you all the riches you ever need. It's
exactly.
But but then that also just makes the plot thicken even more. Like,
but that's
because it's the fact that it's been holding for 50 years now. Jesus.
Yeah, more than that actually, almost
60. Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing with all conspiracy theories is somebody's going to talk eventually. You know what I mean? People aren't good at keeping secrets unless they're getting paid off pretty well. And, like I was about to say, like that's how the mafia does it,
And then was Paul McCartney, was he like married or did he have a girlfriend at the
time? He was married to Linda McCartney. I don't think at the time. I think him and Linda got married afterwards. Let's see. Let's freaking see here. So yeah, him and Linda got married in 1969. So this is after. So she might have never even met the real Paul McCartney, and she only met this Fall character. The plot thickens.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, if you know, the way the mafia does it is, your husband stepped out of line and he had to be taken care of, but don't worry, we're gonna leave a brown paper bag full of money on your doorstep every month.
Yeah,
So
every year, yeah.
Yeah, so you keep this hush hush. It's unfortunate that your husband had to go, but this is the way we do it, and we're gonna make sure that you're still taken care of for the rest of your life. But your husband made a mistake, and he had to pay for it.
I just killed a spider on my wall.
I kind of figured that's what was happening. I was wondering what the shoe was doing. I got very distracted.
Sorry about that.
All good.
It is 8:28, my man. I gotta get ready for this phone call in 2 minutes.
2 minutes. All right. Quick rack. We didn't even get to all the dead rock stars. Everyone's dead. All of our beloved heroes from the 60s. They died. Horrible, tragic deaths. Probably at the hands
Especially
of the
a lot of the drummers.
We could also get into the idea of the CIA created this sort of movement in the 60s, this counterculture movement. That'll be an episode for another time. But Jim Morrison's dad was, I think he was either CIA or just like high-level military. Supposedly the Eagles have some connection with the CIA or something like that. We can do some research on that because that could be a fun topic.
Damn. Yeah,
figure
dude.
that out. And just like
we should continue this next week. This is cool.
Rock and roll conspiracies.
Yeah.
Which would be a great documentary anyway.
Yeah, totally.
The shit out of that.
We got to pick
all right.
Netflix.
All right. So in summation, all of your heroes are tragic figures who either died or didn't die, or was murdered but wasn't murdered, but then committed suicide, but then also overdosed and was taken over by the mafia, and then also taken over by the CIA. It's a very convoluted topic.
Or none of that happened and they're doing just fine.
They might just be doing just fine. Elvis and Tupac chilling on a beach in Cancun.
Sipping on some daiquiris or something.
No, sipping on booze in the House of Blues. Damn. All right. That's a good ending, nice. I guess.
Right on, man. That was a good one.
Man. Yeah. Hey, we'll catch you next time.
Catch you.